Morning, Pa. All right, let's get right into it. Keep having our minds blown by all this cool information. Let's see here. So, last we were talking about, let's see here. Mount of Transfiguration. We were talking about the Moses, Elijah, the Lord sequence of three people in white acting as kind of angels. The sequence is first Moses and his law, then Elijah, then the Lord. So the law at first, and then Elijah would be sealing power, then the Lord. Interesting. And just because you're getting initiated today does not mean that you don't have to keep all the old commandments. The old commandments are still binding on you. It doesn't remove the obligations of the law. It strengthens them, making them more strict. I'll read the last paragraph and then go into the next section. So where we ended off was, on the other hand, what I think we have here is a reference to the appearance and instruction from a priest who is understood to be Moses. Maybe some initial nameless angels, men in white robes, have guided the worshippers to this point. What's funny is men in white robes, he references 1 Nephi 8:5, so probably talking about the angels that are on the Tree of Life vision, have guided the worshippers to this point, but now Adam and Eve are handed over to Moses because his authority is needed. Maybe Moses announces his identity, or maybe the priests in the role of Moses is marked by a known symbol, such as a staff that God gave him on the mountain, or tablets containing the Ten Commandments, so something to mark him as Moses. And now here is the new section. First be reconciled to thy brother. Quote, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. But whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Matthew 5:21-24. Moses makes sense as the angel of the first room because he was Israel's lawgiver. Several times, as he does here, the guide references the old law in order to supersede it by imposing stricter requirements. Who better to deliver such a message than Moses himself? The old law is not sufficient. It's true, you can't kill, but in fact, mere anger without a cause leaves you in danger of the judgment. This mortal idea is delivered in connection with a physical action, which is the approach to an altar. Either the worshippers are at an altar at this point, or they are drawing near to an altar. We don't know of an altar on the temple porch, but if the porch is roofless, perhaps the altar in question is the altar in the courtyard. Perhaps originally the altar was the altar in the courtyard of the tabernacle, which had no separate porch. More about the tabernacle in chapter 9. Or perhaps this is a teaching about the altar in the second room, which is coming right up. Or since we don't know what we don't know, perhaps there was some altar, perhaps even a movable altar, placed here for the purpose beside the pillars. Wherever the altar actually was, The teaching is that the worshippers can't approach the altar with his gift unless he is first reconciled to his brother. The moral idea is expansive. Not only should you not be angry with or have unkind feelings towards your brother without a cause, but if your brother is angry with you, that is also your liability. You have an obligation to reconcile with him, and you can't approach the altar with your gift until you do. Whiles thou art in the way with him. Quote, agree with thine adversary quickly, whiles thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence, till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. Matthew 5:25-26. This is a warning not to let the adversary have anything on you. Your adversary has no power in himself. He's just the one who holds your debt. If you don't clear your debt by the power of the officer and the judge, your adversary, by his accusation, can have you thrown into prison. Adversary in Greek is antidikos. This means an adversary or opponent in a lawsuit, accuser. You can see Bullinger's adversary definition. Your antidiktos is your accuser, your plaintiff, your prosecutor, the one who comes against you in a lawsuit. Jesus and Nephi wouldn't have known these mysteries as Greek texts, but probably as things performed in Hebrew. And it turns out there's a Hebrew word that means the same thing that antidiktos means in Greek. Satan. Your Satan in Hebrew is your adversary or accuser. For instance, in Numbers 22:22, the angel who places himself in Balaam's way does so as a Satan for him. After the Babylonian captivity, the people of the land tried to prevent the rebuilding of the temple, but we don't hear their point of view or know what their objection was, but maybe they thought the people doing the rebuilding were unworthy or apostates. In any case, one of the things they try to do to stop construction is write an accusation. In Hebrew, this is sitneth, in other words, sataning, and it appears out to be a claim that the rebuilders are seditious and should be stopped. That's from Ezra 4:6 and also verses 12-16. What should we imagine here in the ordinance? I think another priest in a different costume, identifiable as Satan, shows up and presents himself as the accuser or adversary of the worshippers. That's interesting. He's referencing Job 1:6-12. So that makes me want to go to Job and see that now. But maybe he has a monstrous mask, but I think it's more likely he's meant to have a seductive allure, so maybe he's dressed as a wealthy oppressor. As we'll discuss below, there's reason to think that he arrives under the sign of the serpent. His appearance comes with a warning not to let him get power of you. Satan can't put you in prison, but he will be there at your judgment to accuse you. The Book of Mormon contains a passage that illuminates this encounter with the adversary. Alma 9-14 recounts the ministry of Alma and Amulek and Ammonihah. We've already seen in chapter 1 that the mysteries are a key issue in these confrontations. In fact, they give shape to the whole section, as we see in these chapters to come. A chief figure in these encounters is Zeezrom. He seems to be a lawyer, and he is the foremost to accuse Amulek and Alma. which makes him not just a lawyer, but the Satan in this scene. Zeezrom tries to catch Alma out in apparent contradictions. In the course of the Lord, meaning, capitalize the ordinance, in the course of the Lord, how many gods are there really? Are the wicked also saved? Is the Son the same person as the Father? But before asking his trick questions, Zeezrom tries simply to bribe Alma with a lot of money, apparently 6 weeks' statutory wages of a judge under the law of Mosiah, to deny the existence of a supreme being. And Alma rebukes him, and Zeezrom is stunned. Then Alma makes this comment, quote, sorry, it's really interesting. I'm wondering how much is in that Zeezrom space. I think that is definitely put in to show that, see, all these things that you go through in the temple are real. Because if he's talking about there being a Satan who's trying to bribe him and accuse him and question him and contradict him, that I'm wondering if Mormon in his abridgment basically said, no, this is good stuff. This really shows what we're talking about for temple worshipers, that, here this instruction that Jesus is giving is showing, hey, there's accusers out there that pull this stuff, and here's an example. So Alma rebukes him, and Zeezrom is stunned. Then Alma makes this comment, quote, and thou seest that we know that thy plan was a very subtle plan, as to the subtlety of the devil, for to lie and to deceive this people, that thou mightest set them against us, to revile us, and to cast us out. Now this was a plan of thine adversary, and he hath exercised his power in thee. Now I would that ye should remember that what I say unto thee, I say unto all. And behold, I say unto you all, that this was a snare of the adversary, which he has laid to catch this people, that he might bring you into subjugation unto him, that he might encircle you about with his chains, that he might chain you down to everlasting destruction, according to the power of his captivity. Alma 12, 4-6. So Alma tells Zeezrom that the cunning trap Zeezrom thought he was setting for Alma and Amulek was in fact a trap set by the adversary that had ensnared Zeezrom and the people of Ammonihah. The word adversary doesn't appear often in the Book of Mormon, outside of 3 Nephi 12, the Sermon on the Mount, and 2 Nephi 2:7, which is quoting Isaiah 50. It's used twice. In 1 Nephi 15, Nephi uses the term to explain his father's temple ascent vision, and it appears here. Given all the other mysteries content in Alma 9:14, we should consider the possibility that the debate with Zeezrom, the accuser, is showing us, disguised as mere history, what the worshippers' encounter with the adversary looked like. This suggests that the adversary in Matthew 5 might be seen as a person of status and wealth, not obviously a monster. It suggests that some part of the encounter might be the adversary offering the worshipper money to deny their belief or walk away. These verses, with their reference to chains, show us further evidence that the adversary in the course of the Lord attempts to use chains to ensnare worshippers. Although these obviously have spiritual meaning, in the ordinance they were likely physical objects, actual chains, somehow used as props in the performance. We should observe that Zeezrom's plan is a subtle plan as to the subtlety of the devil. This is a clear indicator that the adversary, who is the devil, comes in the guise of a serpent, because the serpent who tempted Eve was more subtle than any beast of the field. So here is yet another indicator that the myth of the course of the Lord is the story of Eden. Dude. tying these all together, and it's amazing. It seems a little more scatterbrained than how Don Bradley does things, but he brings the points. I think the problem is that he has so much that he wants to cover, and how where it's all shown in all these different places. So, but he ties it together well. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God and serve him. We have an additional image of the encounter with the adversary to throw into the mix. Matthew has given us a script of an encounter with the devil in Matthew 4. In that chapter, Jesus 3 times encounters the devil. In Greek, diabolos, meaning slanderer. The fifth mention of devils in the chapter, in verse 24, is an unrelated word. The encounters expressly center around the temple and have Jesus ascending through 3-part space. So we should consider these scripts may describe what takes place in the course of the Lord. I take it this is talking about Jesus being tempted in the wilderness? Matthew chapter 4. What happens in Matthew chapter 4? Anyways, let me just read on. He's quoting stuff. Okay. The following discussion comes from conversations I had with and comments by Matt Tolman. He suggested I not mention him in the text, but this is how I acknowledge other people's non-published contributions. Sorry, Matt. And thanks. Some lawyers are okay, it turns out. Is it possible that worshippers in the course of the Lord, in fact, encounter the adversary 3 times, counterparts to the 3 angel guides, and maybe 1 encounter per room? Let's look at the 3 temptations. First, Jesus hungers. Quote, Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But he answered and said, It is written. Dude, I'm reading the scriptures a bit differently now. It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Matthew 4, 1-4. The first encounter is in the wilderness, suggesting that it might be outside, and it's a wilderness Jesus reaches by going up. In our context, this fits well with the temple's roofless porch, which one enters linguistically by ascending. Note that Jesus comes fasting, which might well have been the state of worshippers entering the course of the Lord. See the next chapter. Jesus is tempted to create bread, and worshippers ask for the Yahweh bread in their prayer in the second room. We'll talk about the Yahweh bread in the next chapter. When Jesus is tempted to produce bread to assuage, which is weird because it looks like sausage, so I always say assuage, but it's apparently assuage. That was one word that always vexed me. Anyways, when Jesus is tempted to produce bread to assuage his hunger caused by fasting, he responds that man, Adam, in Deuteronomy 8:3, which is the text Jesus is quoting, or in this context, Adam, needs to feast upon the word, which is exactly the feast of the Yahweh bread, or flesh and blood of Melchizedek in the second room. See the next chapter. Finally, note that bread and stone are 2 of the 4 temple and messianic symbols exchanged with the Father at the straight and narrow gate. See chapter 4. And that a son who asks for bread should not be given a stone. This is seriously like reading a math book again, where you're skipped a few chapters and you're like, wait, what is he talking about? Well, it's ahead. So he is referencing all these important parts, which also imply the different parables, which I can tell, and you can tell, hopefully, because I'm remembering how the Solomon's temple was laid out. This temptation fits astonishingly well into the course of the Lord. If it is understood to happen in the first room, it forecasts experiences and symbols of the second and third room. If this encounter is understood as a script, then maybe, having been introduced to the spiritual gift of faith, as discussed in chapter 8, the hungry worshippers meet their adversary and slanderer who suggests they abuse the gift of faith and their position as supplicant children of God to make bread. They reject him, anticipating the feast of the word. Note that their rejection takes the form of quoting the Old Testament. Quote, this is Deuteronomy 8:3. And he humbled thee, and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna, which thou knowest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. Oh, there is a footnote here that says, this footnote was in conjunction with the hungry worshippers meet their adversary and slanderer who suggest they abuse the gift of faith and their position as supplicant children of God to make bread. And footnote says, though worshippers may not realize this yet, transforming stones into bread would be spiritual regression, since the stone lies above the veil in the holy temple, lies above the veil in the Holy of Holies, and the bread is eaten below the veil in the Hechal. Satan is literally trying to lure worshippers into going backwards. Dude. Oh. And this is why we get this milk before meat stuff that... Like, there is so much stuffed in each of these symbols. No wonder he has a hard time writing a straight line. Anyways, specifically, Jesus, or the worshiper, quotes Deuteronomy. More on that below. Satan then takes Jesus up again from the first space into the second. Here, the word up is an illusion of the translation. A word meaning up does not appear in Greek. However, the idea of up does appear in the images. Quote, then the devil taketh him up into the holy city, and setteth him on a pinnacle of the temple, and saith unto him, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And Jesus said unto him, it is written again, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. That's Matthew 4, 5-7. The upness comes from going to the temple specifically. One name applied to the temple as a whole is Hekal, which is also the name of the second room. See the next chapter. We're still on the porch, dang it. No! Anyway. In an underlying Hebrew, the text of these verses might be understood to refer to Jesus' presence in the second room. The Greek word translated as temple is hieron, which is sometimes thought in the New Testament to refer to the entire temple complex, but hieron means holy thing, and in this context could mean holy place. Love you, Hunter. Have a good day at school.
Yeah, I will.
So hieron means holy thing, and this context could mean a holy place, i.e. the second room. The word underlying pinnacle here is the Greek ptergion, meaning ptergion. There's a P at the front, but I would expect that to be silent. So ptergion. T-E-R-U-G-I-O-N. Ptergion, meaning little wing. Ah, little wing, under the pinnacle. Okay. So he's in this, the word underlying pinnacle here is ptergion, meaning little wing. The idea of translating it as pinnacle is that a pinnacle is a pointy thing, like a little wing. Oh, Oh, but other understandings are possible. This encounter might be occurring explicitly in the Hekal temple, or second room of the temple, maybe in some known station within it, say, to the side of the altar, wings being on the sides of birds. If this script, if this is a script, what sense does this temptation make in the second room of the course of the Lord? I find this the most cryptic of the three encounters. Satan quotes Psalm 91 in his effort to lure Jesus into sin. Here is the psalm in its entirety. Quote, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wing shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him, and show him my salvation." Psalms 91, 1 through 16. The appearance of feathers and wings in the Septuagint, Turgas, in Psalms 91:4, may help explain why this second encounter with Satan is said to take place on a Turgian. Note that this psalm seems to be literally a script for multiple speakers, and I've broken it up accordingly. Following the suggestions of Hosfield and Zengler in their commentary about this psalm, they state, quote, "The temple motifs that echo at a number of points in the psalm, as well as the shifting voices or roles promised by a speaker to the petitioner, divine speech, points to a background to the psalm in the temple liturgy." So how he broke it up was, the people would say, God is my refuge, in him I trust. And then the other person would say, he's going to deliver thee from the fowler. He'll be thy buckler and shield and arrow that flieth by day, and it was at noonday. It'll come nigh unto thee. Only with thy eyes you'll see the reward of the wicked. And then the other section is, the Lord is my refuge. He'll give his angels charge over me, bear up thy hands, you won't dash your foot against a stone. And then the next section is, because he said his love for me, I'll deliver him, I'll answer him, I will be with him in trouble, I will deliver him, with long life I'll satisfy him and show him my salvation. So, don't know if that has specific meaning for you, but there you go. Psalm 91 reads like a liturgical text, a script from multiple voices. The commentators suggest the liturgy could be a portal liturgy, connected with passing through a temple gate, or a plea for blessings. Given our lack of knowledge about concrete form of liturgical ceremonies in the Jerusalem temple, we can only guess. It has also been suggested that the psalm is part of the representation of the royal calling. Maybe the meaning of the second temptation is that the devil is attempting to warn the worshiper away from the encounter with the foundation stone. Maybe he's trying to persuade the worshiper that the ministering angels will follow him and continue to serve him, even if he now leaves, forsaking the course of the Lord. Maybe this is simply a second temptation, to attempt a miracle for personal gratification and the sake of pride. Sorry, I'm thinking of things that happen naturally in the course of someone's life. When he was suggesting that maybe Satan is trying to tempt them to say, hey, you can just walk away and they'll still help you. This isn't such a big deal. You don't need to keep going down this path. You can just take a break, sit on the side of the road. God will still help you. You're still God's children. You can stop. It's okay. And I'm thinking about how people take different pit stops on their life. That they give up what they have because they're just so tired. They've done enough. They've done enough work. They've done enough, and they don't want to keep going. Oh, God, I can think of people who either give up on trying to work hard in the church, that's kind of minor stuff, or people who give up on trying to learn, trying to advance, trying to do more. Or people give up on their marriages. I mean, that's a big, if you're in the Church of Jesus Christ and you get married in the temple, I mean, that's a big one. Where you're just like, I'm just so done with this. They're not what I expected. They're not what I wanted. They didn't meet my expectations. Whatever it is. I do it in a sarcastic voice to kind of add emphasis that the point is to persevere and to just be waylaid by the idea that it's like, dude, God loves you. He's going to take care of you. Don't worry about this stuff. That can be a lot more tempting than people realize. And I think people get tempted with this stuff and they don't even recognize it as one of those things that Satan or the accuser tries to pull you away with. I think people it just happens naturally, and they're just they either give into it or they keep persevering. Huh. Maybe this is simply a second temptation to attempt a miracle for personal gratification and the sake of pride, which is also a temptation. The quotation of Psalm 91 raises further questions. Maybe what we have in Matthew 4 is the script reflecting a simple two-person dialogue containing a challenge and response. Psalm 91, with its concern about the perils of road, royal overtones, and theme of entering into the habitation of God, seems appropriate for the moment of preparing to enter the straight and narrow gate to enter into the kingdom of God. Maybe a chorus sings Psalm 91, or previously sang Psalm 91, while Satan uses the language of the psalm to challenge the worshiper. Maybe Psalm 91 is the actual script, or some portion of it, and Satan's lines in Matthew 4 are just meant to remind us of the full dialogue. We can only guess, though our guesses are a little more tightly focused than Hosfield and Zangler's. He's quoting them. Again, the worshipper's rebuke is a quotation from Deuteronomy. Ye shall not tempt the Lord thy God as ye tempted him in Massa, Deuteronomy 6:16. To tempt him the third time, the devil takes Jesus up once more into the third part of the three-part space. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and sheweth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and saith unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Then the devil leadeth him, and behold, angels came and ministered then the devil leaveth him, and behold, the angels came and ministered unto him. That's Matthew 4, 8 through 11. The devil is making one final pitch. All the kingdoms of the world can belong to the worshiper if he will only fall down and worship Satan. If the devil really does appear 3 times in the course of the Lord to attempt to seduce worshippers from the path, this makes sense as the final approach, made just before or even just as the worshipper reaches the veil. Once through the straight and narrow gate, the worshipper will be in the kingdom of God. So the devil now offers him the kingdoms of the world, hopefully having been warned that he must choose treasures on earth or in heaven. The worshipper is prepared to reject false coin. Similarly, once at the end of the straight and narrow path, the worshippers will fall down in the presence of the tree with good fruit. All Satan demands as his price is that Adam and Eve fall down and worship him. The prepared worshiper approaching to meet God and ask to be accepted as his child knows the right answer and escapes the clutches of the adversary. Once again, this response is a quotation from Deuteronomy. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God and serve him, and shalt swear by his name. Deuteronomy 6:13. Differences between the King James text of these verses in Matthew and the verses in Deuteronomy are because the King James Deuteronomy is translated from the Hebrew, and King James Matthew is quoting the Septuagint version of Deuteronomy, which is only approximately the same. Beyond that, Matthew adds one additional twist. In Greek, Deuteronomy 6:13 says, Thou shalt fear, which is phobethes, the Lord thy God. But Matthew changes one word so that it says, Thou shalt worship proskinesis, the Lord thy God.
Can you get a little bit of tape?
Here? What? Why? Hurry. You walk in this room like a horror picture. and then lightly shut the door. Don't shut it all the way. Come on. And then she shuts it all away. Oh well. 2 for 2. So instead of phobobethes, it is proskinesis. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God. This is proskinesis, meaning to prostrate oneself after the Eastern custom to do reverence or homage to anyone. This is the same action that Satan demands of the worshiper in Matthew 4:9. It seems to be the appropriate response of the worshiper to the tree of life in 1 Nephi 8:30, and the Son of God in 1 Nephi 11:24. It's striking that Jesus, or the worshiper, quotes Deuteronomy specifically. Was Deuteronomy felt to be particularly binding on Satan? If so, was that because Deuteronomy contained some special share of divine power? We should consider also Luke 4, which shows the same temptations, the same dialogue. Luke reorders the temptations. Matthew has stones to bread, angel will bear thee up, and all the kingdoms, whereas Luke is stones to bread, all the kingdoms, and angels will bear thee up. As between Matthew and Luke, I tend to default to Matthew, because it contains the Sermon on the Mount. It's possible, however, that Luke's order offered the kingdoms of the world in connection with the proposed commitment to choose the treasures of heaven over the treasures of earth, or perhaps he was invited to cast himself down from the top of the stairs just before passing through the straight and narrow gate. How might this reading of Matthew 4 and Luke 4 fit with Zeezrom? I can imagine that a satanic offer of money might easily occur either in connection with the temptation to turn stone into bread, not to get too cute about the meaning of the word bread, or when Satan offers the worshiper all the kingdoms of the world. For the moment, I think we have to stay open to the possibilities and apply our own experience and judgment. The next section. Whosoever looketh on a woman. Quote, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her, hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. It hath been said, Whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery. That's Matthew 5:27-32. Again, the angel guides Moses, delivers to worshippers a more elevated commandment than what the Mosaic law prescribed. We have here strict teachings on sexual morality. Lust itself is a sin, and divorce is prohibited. These two teachings seem to be packaged together, and we might call the whole something like the law of chastity. I take this to be the first explicit moral commitment imposed on worshippers, especially in light of the section that follows. The idea of plucking out your eye is interesting for a couple of reasons. First, this strikes me as the kind of reference in the text that functions as stage direction. In other words, there might be sacred gestures here that worshippers acted out. Second, the reference might not really be to eyes. In other biblical passages, prophets use euphemisms to refer to genitals. For instance, Isaiah seems to have used feet to refer to genitals in Isaiah 6:2 and 7:20. The seraphim cover their private parts with their wings, and the razor that is hired will shave off pubic hair, not hair of the feet. The eyes in other contexts have been thought to be symbolic of genitals, and specifically of testicles. Freud pointed out that in Sophocles' tragedy, Oedipus punishes himself for his sexual sin of sleeping with his mother by removing his own eyes, which is a stand-in for his self-castration. So maybe at this point in the drama, worshippers simulated a self-mutilation. Maybe the object of mutilation was their genitals rather than their eyes, or maybe they mimed removing an eye, but on some level, even unconsciously, they were meant to understand that they were mutilating their genitals. Okay, that's interesting. Pardon me, I do want to check out what is Isaiah 6:2 and 7:20. So, just a second here. What is that talking about in these references? Because we're at a next section where it's like, swear not at all. Okay, let's go to the library. Let's go to scriptures. Let's go to Old Testament. Let's go to, where's Isaiah? Nehemiah, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Isaiah. We are going to 6. And then we'll go to 7 here in a moment. So Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah sees the Lord, his sins are forgiven, he's called to prophecy. He prophesies of the Jews' rejection of Christ's teaching. A remnant will return. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon his throne, high and lifted up. His train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims. Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly. So he was kind of covered. And one cried unto the Lord and said, Holy, holy, holy is Lord of hosts. Post of the door removed. Him that cried, woe is me, I'm undone. The coal handing it to him. Okay. And then in 720, he's seeing Christ being born as a virgin. This is Isaiah's vision of God. And so 720. And they shall come, and they shall rest, all of them, in the desolate valleys, and the holes of the rocks, and upon all the thorns, upon all the bushes. In the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired, namely, by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria the head, and hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard. It shall come to pass that in that day that a man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep, and it shall come to pass for the abundance of milk, they shall give, he shall eat butter. For butter and honey shall everyone eat that is left in the land. Shall hiss for the flies. Syria and Egypt. So this section is talking about Ephraim and Syria waging war against Judah, and Christ will be born of a virgin, but that anyone who remains will be able to. So I'm trying to figure out, does this mean that when he's talking about that in the same day the Lord shall shave with a razor that is hired, namely them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and body hair, I guess, shall also consume the beard, that everyone will be shaved, head, unlike me. Interesting. I never knew that. All right, but it makes sense. I understand where he's getting at, but either way, either way that you should get rid of lust, whether that's miming one gesture or another, the idea is to get rid of lust. Swear not at all. Yeah, not too long. Again, ye have heard that hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but thou shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither thou shalt swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Matthew 5, 33, 37. Once more, it is appropriate that Moses be the one who presents a new idea, superseding what was taught of by them of old, i.e. Moses. If a major moral commitment has now been presented to the worshippers, the question arises, how shall each worshipper indicate whether he or she accepts the commitment of the law of chastity? The answer appears to be simply saying yea or nay. Presumably, if a worshipper said nay, that was the end of the ceremony for that person. But also, there is a specific oath presented here, which is forbidden, or at least its use was forbidden in worship. The oath consists of swearing by a succession of things: heaven, earth, Jerusalem, and your own head. It is striking how similar this forbidden oath is to the oath sworn by the earliest secret combination in the Book of Mormon. Jared engages Achish to murder his father, the king. Achish recruits his accomplices. Yeah, that was also really funny. I noticed that in reading Ether. And it came to pass Achish gathered in unto the house of Jared all his kinsfolk, and said unto them, Will ye swear unto me that you will be faithful unto me in the thing which I shall desire of you? And it came to pass that they all sware unto him by the God of heaven, and also by the heavens, and also by the earth, and by their heads, that whoso should vary from the assistance which Achish desired should lose his head, and whoso should divulge whatsoever thing Achish made known unto them, the same should lose his life. That's Ether 8:12-13. Achish's coven swears by God, the heavens, earth, and their own heads. Moroni informs us that this was an oath that had been handed down from Cain, known as a tool, quote, to help such as sought power to gain power, and to murder, and to plunder, and to lie, and to commit all manner of wickedness and whoredoms, unquote. Each oath has 4 terms, and 3 of them, heaven, earth, and your head, are the same and in the same order. Both oaths progress through their 4 terms, from greatest to least. In Matthew, it goes from heaven to earth to Jerusalem to your head. In Ether, it's by God, by heaven, by earth, and your head. Why is the 4th term different? The Jaredites predated Jerusalem, so they couldn't swear by it. Is the Matthew, I wonder if he meant 3rd term, because it goes heaven, earth, Jerusalem, then your head. I think he meant 3rd term. The Jaredites predated Jerusalem, so they couldn't swear by it. Is the Matthew 5 version of this oath the later version where Jerusalem has replaced God over time? Maybe to avoid mentioning God in a profane context? Oh, that's right. That's because God is the 4th term, or the 1st term. Anyway. Has Jerusalem has replaced God over time, then maybe to avoid mentioning God in a profane context? Or did the visionary men not want to repeat their foe's oath word for word? So they substituted Jerusalem for God as a circumlocution, maybe circumlocution, maybe reordering it to keep the progression from greatest to least, and also to conceal the substitution. We can only guess, but these are substantially the same oaths. Now, if we are to take Moroni seriously, it looks like the visionary men of Nephi and Jesus' temple were forbidden an oath, and they believed that the adherents of the secret combinations took that very oath. This tells us, for the Nephite prophets, the secret combinations were not an enemy, they were the enemy. Quote, every community knows a type of enemy which represents, as it were, an antipole to what the community recognizes as good and desirable, and continuously threatens the same, e.g., the communists to the capitalists, and vice versa. Enemies of this sort, by their very nature, carriers of all that is subversive and evil. The view with that particular group or culture holds of its enemies is crucial to an understanding of that group or culture. That is from the book of Keel, page 78. The Nephite prophets saw their intimate enemy, their polar opposite, as a conspiracy to seek power, commit murder, plunder, lie, and perpetrate all manner of wickedness and whoredoms. This suggests that we should see the visionary men as a conspiracy opposed to the seeking of power, to murder, plundering, lying, and to general wickedness and whoredoms. For the Book of Mormon, evil is a conspiracy, and so is good. Good should conspire against evil, and turn him the other also. Oh, we're going to stop here for now. But that's interesting. So, good conspiracy versus bad conspiracy. Good conspiracy upholds honesty, righteousness, chastity. What's also interesting now that he's bringing out the idea of Satan or the accuser's temptation in the mysteries of the course of the Lord, as he's putting it in his book, is fascinating to me, because when online, there's a bunch of times where people will tie together certain things. Like they'll be like, oh, look at all these famous people who are dressing up as Satan and during the middle of Super Bowl and all this other stuff. And look at all these people tapping into the wickedness of Hollywood and whatever else. In some ways, yes, it's kind of like it can seem like a tinfoil hat thing where you have, oh, usually they're all just bargaining with Satan. At the same time, they kind of do have a point. I mean, we've recently seen a lot of scandals among things like P. Diddy and the people who go to his parties, and there was Epstein and his island, and there's a lot of powerful people that went to those places, both in Hollywood and in politics, and that they even there's times where a lot of people will really want and desire something. They're truly asking, and then opportunity shows up. It's almost as if Satan's coming up and opportunity is showing up and saying, "Hey, it comes back to that story of the deal with the devil at the crossroads. It's the same story. Here's the guitar player coming down the road, and he comes up to this crossroads, and he really wants to be the greatest guitar player in the world. And then here's Satan sitting on a stump or whatever, just at the crossroads, hanging out, and says, "I can get you everything you want. Just sign here on the dotted line." And there he is. He's becomes super rich and famous, but in it he loses his soul. I mean, that's a pretty dang easy, not too hard allegory. That's just common folklore. That's kind of the same thing, where here you've got all these people who sell their soul, in a way, to literally go down a path that makes them more debauched, more morally loose, and accepting of all sorts of stuff that you're just like, this is not good. And whether they do it because they want to get famous, or they become famous and it then starts corrupting their soul, they'd want to hold on to that. And so they're told that, hey, you want to stay famous? Well, you should drop the good girl persona and start dressing more provocatively. You're growing up now, girly, and now you have the assets to show off, and that kind of stuff. The whole, most of the girls from the Disney Channel that grow up and live lives of that just run their lives into the ground, or like Taylor Swift started out as the girl next door, sweet country girl persona, and then now she's turned into this pop star idol who has songs that are on kind of pushing it over the edge there. It changes them. It changes them. And I can understand it being a natural process, but at the same time, that's why we have the folklore of, the devil at the crossroads. You have choices in your life, and you're pursuing this, and if you pursue it with your utmost, and it's not the thing that is the best in life, do you sell your soul to it? And that's a very interesting question for each of us, because in some ways we all have our own, what are we selling our time and life and energy for? Are we just, I sit behind a desk to help make sure I've got my family provided for. I so desperately would love to make as much money as I do without having to spend that time at work. Why? So then I could be home homeschooling and teaching my children, because it seems it would be a heck of a lot better than whatever time they're wasting at public school. I'm sorry, it's just when my kids come home and they goof off enough, and it's partially, of course, their own fault. I mean, I can't blame the school system all itself, but my kids will goof off in school, and so they come home and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing with homework, and it's like, this is not hard. Like, public school is not hard. They've made it nothing but easier, and I guess they've made it easy to the point that they can goof off and then come home and say, I don't know what's going on, and then I can teach them in 5-10 minutes what their lessons really is, and suddenly they're just fine. It's like, you spend an hour on this subject at school or more, and yet you didn't understand it? Like, they're either not paying attention, or the teacher's not grabbing their attention, or they're not, it's just a mess. And so I'd love to be teaching them. I'd love to be teaching them. I'd love to be taking them all over the world, showing them all these things. I have a huge sense of regret, because it's like, my life has been so hectic and stuff. I haven't been able to show them so much of the world. And I'm annoyed with that. So it's like, to me, that's really good stuff. That's the really good stuff. Unfortunately, most of life is in the cracks. You have work or schedule or whatever you set for yourself. You commit yourself to. But all you're living is in the cracks of the time where you come home and you have an hour or two to, sit down on the front room floor and explore a fun TV show with them, or play a game, or help them with their homework. On the weekends, do you go out camping or hiking, or do you sit at home vegging out? It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's one of those crazy things that I sit here and think that I hope my children are very dedicated to the important things in life, because all the mundane, all the grind of daily life is made all that much more worthwhile for helping them to realize the importance of choosing good and choosing right over choosing bad and anger and hatred and everything else. Overcome your personal flaws, whatever it is, to become a better person. It makes your life so much more happy and better. This is just a fascinating book, because he's trying to pull in so much, it fires my brain off in all sorts of directions. But it makes you appreciate kind of the whole pattern of the whole course of the Lord, as he puts it. And the idea of going through. I'm fascinated. I'm wondering if you put the Sermon on the Mount in a 3-stage production like this, if that would help kids prepare for the temple or things like that. I don't know. I don't think it would mean that as much to them until they've gone through the temple, but it sure is fascinating how he's pointing out how that could be very much a part of it all. But it's funny that he's saying that good is this conspiracy of good to fight against the conspiracies of evil. And I think it's pretty obvious that there's been groups that have done that. Like I was saying, Epstein Islands and Diddy Island, where it's like, you don't talk about the stuff that could really tarnish your image. But then you've already gone and done those things, and so you are going to be shunned for it, etc. It's interesting. I think I never thought of it as good conspiring. Good conspiring to get rid of evil. Yet at the same time, it's like, this is your antithesis. people who organize themselves to murder to get gain or blackmail or lie and cheat and steal. So we should conspire to do good, to root out those things. But at the same time, that's actually probably a very good point, because unfortunately, organization breeds power. Because in the Gadianton robber's case, in the Book of Mormon, you could rely on your fellow Gadianton robber to have your back, to lie for you in front of a judge, or have a corrupt judge let you off, or deny evidence, or halt things that would stop the kind of halt your evil corruption. It's just like, I don't believe at all that Trump is some great guy who's a white knight who's going to save us all. I think he's going to do a very good job, and I think he's already starting to do a good job of clearing out a lot of government waste. I also think he's a business guy, and I think he's also going to do things that are good for businesses, such as the HB1 visas stuff that replaces a lot of American workers for foreign workers, because then they can, why pay Americans when you can pay a foreigner on a visa at 1/3 the price, or whatever it is. It's like, he's not going to be perfect by any means. But I think him screwing up government corruption, of getting rid of bureaucracies and things like that, is going to be a huge benefit. I think that in the wake of trying to root out all this crap that's happened, there's going to be a lot of things that people object to, especially if they're some sort of government worker. And the problem is that a lot of people have been trained by media of, well, root for Trump because he's the greatest, he's the most awesomest. And there is a lot that he's doing that is great and awesome. But I think, like, I remember his first term. He's the one who hired Fauci, probably because that's what the swamp of DC presented to him. He's like, well, this guy seems like he's the right one. Got him in. And he was also the first one to print all the checks directly to the people, which was going to kick off inflation really quickly. And so it's like, he doesn't do everything right. But he does things a heck of a lot better than when the news about the Bidens having been sitting there, like, dealing in influence with, what was it? There was Ukraine, there's Burisma in Ukraine, there was like 2 other countries that recently came out where it's like, yeah, here, we're getting these checks that come directly from here to one of these Biden shell companies that go directly to Biden. And it's just like preemptive pardons for all these people too. It's like, what is going on? What is really seriously going on? So, I mean, people get their team jerseys on and go rah, rah, ree, which helps add to covering their tracks, frankly. And the problem that I see with the Trump was the same thing that happened after his first term, is that the next guy to come in, if it happens to be Democrat, they'll just undo all this presidential stuff. It's becoming more and more as if the president runs everything and Congress does nothing. Well, Congress has been doing nothing for a very long time. Well, doing nothing for a very long time because they've just abdicated all their responsibilities to alphabet agencies. But it's funny because it's like, what better way to just wield power by, oh, well, we're doing good, see? And it's been on both sides. It's just, this is why Congress sucks badly. There's very few, like, really stalwart good actors that I admire in Congress. And Mike Lee is one of them, mostly, which is funny. I never thought that. I was always, again, Team Jersey, rah, rah, ree, go Mike Lee. But there are some things where I'm like, dude, you've been in there for a while as a senator, and yet you weren't willing to. I know he hides behind the idea of, well, we need to see what we can do constitutionally. But there's sometimes where you're like, wait, there's a real big problem with these giant tech companies taking away people's basic freedoms. And you don't want to just correct something where it's like, let's make sure that any company that's acting as, anyway, I could go on forever about politics. You don't want to take on a company that basically says, hey, we're a free and open space that you can say anything on, and for freedom of speech, but then they can edit it and say, no, not this free speech, but not have repercussions, even though they were acting as a open forum. He doesn't want to take that on? I asked him about that one time directly. And he was like, yeah, well, there's kind of repercussions we need to watch out for, and legally we need to see what that will do and see about constitutionality in it. And I get it. It's a sticky thing because he really does like the Constitution, and that's great. And he does do a lot of good, and that's great. But there are times where it's like, yeah, but what about the unconstitutionality of this? You set up these two ideas to cover the back of Google and YouTube and all this, but then they're covered. But the problem is that leaves the people exposed. It's like, nope, we're going to deplatform you. We're like when banks literally debank people for their political ideology, or they debank them for their what they do. Like, it is perfectly legal to have and own firearms, but the banks are literally debanking companies that make firearms or stuff for firearms, even though that's perfectly legal to try and defend yourself and your family. That seems really weird. Anyway, so it's funny because the reason I bring up all this political stuff is because if you imagine that people get together, get organized to try and go against something, it gives them strength. And especially if they can cover each other. Like, that's the problem with the old school mainstream media, was that they were always covering and being extremely partisan for Democrat policies like, let's get rid of guns and let's push agendas and everything like that. Even though it's not great for people, because if you disarm a population, then the government can just run over you in every sense of the word. And then you can't even defend yourself. And you see the results of that. But ideologically, that's how they're driven. And then they get the mainstream media to get on board and try and cover them. And it's just ridiculous. And then, you have someone who comes up against it and opposes it and says, this isn't right, like Trump. And he does it bombastically. And so they just ream him up and down. And, he's so terrible. He's so... foaming at the mouth kind of crap. And you're like, whoa, jeez. And I think people have finally woken up to it, that it's like, yeah, Trump may be bombastic and annoying, but he at least was a president, whereas Joe Biden was a vegetable. And other people and the agencies and everything else, the system was running him to the point where it's just like, wow, that is, wow. I don't know. It's funny because I think a problem that comes from the general conservative side of things is that people believe in individual freedom. And so they're just like, yeah, well, individually we'll freely associate to do these things and not be super well organized. Like when we finally did do organizing things like the Tea Party, immediately Obama's IRS tried to take on the Tea Party. He had the organization because he was in office and he was the one who was trying to tramp down on those things. Or when the Department of Justice under Biden was taking on parents for speaking out at school meetings, it's like, whoa, you have people who are just trying to stand up to speak their mind and speak truth of, we don't want this stuff in our schools. We want them to focus on education. And no, we can't have that. You have to have these books that are literal pornography in them. And it's like, if you have to edit that out of the community standards of the meeting that you're in, you want this on bookshelves with access to elementary school kids. No. this is not good. Ah. Oh well. We continue on, and it just shows me that perhaps having an organization for good is a very good idea. But then it can be just as oppressive. I think of Pharisees and Sadducees and how they became kind of oppressive on the other hand. The one where it's like the pearl clutching of, you can't walk more than this much? That's considered work. And it's like Jesus came along and said, you're missing the point here. So there's bad on either side, and the biggest thing is to try and, sorry to dive into politics, because especially when we're talking about religious stuff, but to me it's very applicable, because here's examples of organization versus disorganization. And if you are organized for good and you try to make sure that the organization stays for good, that this is a good benefit. The unfortunate thing is that if you take it too far, it becomes oppressive. And so the good question is how do you find that middle ground where you organize and support each other for doing good, that you just only follow God and His commandments and try and support everything that supports those, but then at the same time don't become a tyrant and oppressive. I think the warnings are all in there. I think the warnings are all in how it's set up on the Sermon on the Mount of do good, do kind, and other things. And maybe you'll get into that in other chapters, but that's interesting, the idea of him proposing that you're promising all together to support that which is good and right and organize along that line, which is an antithesis to the people who are like, well, we can organize to get what we want, which is control. We want to control people's thoughts. We want to control people's actions. We want them to be addicted to substances and lustful things and all sorts of stuff. Let's get them addicted to all the bad stuff. Why? Because people can. Why not? Why shouldn't they? Why should people not have any, self-restraint? It's just one of those funny things. Anyway, I guess that's the end of my rant. It's pretty ambiguous at the end. No real good point. Just a final, there you are. Well, love you lots. We'll see you.